swept up in today's independent music.
So yeah, thanks so much for doing this. This is awesome. I was doing a bunch of research for GMN for our radio station and just trying to piece together a show for Halloween for talking about the marriage of metal and horror, and then came across your documentary and I was like, oh, this is perfect. It's like, when is this out? And
Yeah.
then realized that it's in the film festival circuit and it's not out, but
Yep. Not yet.
I'm very much excited for it to be. But yeah, so first and foremost, tell me how did you what drove you to put this documentary together?
So I mean, I've been a fan of metal and horror for years, decades. But I think what really started this project specifically was when I attended Kirk Hammett's Fear Festival convention in California back in 2014. And he basically put on a convention where he wanted to bring together heavy metal and horror, into one place. So that's basically what he did. And once I left, and I was there kind of helping out. My friend and producer Robert Lucas, he's friends with Kirk, and he's very well connected in that industry. So he brought
He's
me
doing
on
music videos with him too, right? Or
Uh,
promo videos for him or something.
yeah, I mean, we both shot a bunch of stuff at the convention and some stuff for Kirk. So so we're kind of like working, but at the same time we had full access to everything, and we're hanging out backstage, and it was really cool. And so afterwards, I kind of started wondering if there had ever been a documentary made on why this connection works so well together. Why is it that so many metal artists are so heavily influenced by horror? And there hadn't yet been a documentary done on that subject matter, so I figured it might be a good time. So so we just kind of came up with the idea from there. And because we had so many good connections at that point with people in the world of heavy metal and horror, we just started reaching out and just started asking if people wanted to sit down for an interview, and kind of built it up from there.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm really excited. One, because I've always wanted to check out one of John Carpenter's tours, but I'm still just very happy that he's even in the doc in the first place, and that he's sitting down to chat with you guys. And and also being a huge horror fan, on the flip side of that, I'm very excited to see Michael Berryman doing the hosting of the piece as well.
Mm-hmm.
But what got you? So, like, where do you take your influences from? Like, were your parents like, don't you dare do this, is stuff from the devil as a kid? Or were you just always growing up watching horror and listening to metal? Or like, what got you into that stuff?
Yeah, well, I could say that it was sort of the opposite situation. My dad was a huge horror fan, and he kind of got me into it. He grew up in the 30s and 40s, so he was kind of around for the original Universal monsters, and so he was big on Dracula and Frankenstein and Wolfman, Mummy, and all that stuff. And then later got into the Hammer films. Those were probably his favorites. I think Curse of Frankenstein was probably my dad's favorite horror film of all time.
Wow.
So he got me into it very early on when I was a kid, and so ever since I can remember, I was into horror, since I was young. And my mom wasn't really into it, but she was supportive, because I started kind of creating stuff. Like I originally wanted to be a special effects artist, so I was working on that, and I was creating all kinds of creatures and bloody things and stuff. And I think she just admired the creativity and the work that I was putting in, and she saw that it was like she was very much into art, so she saw it as more of an art form, instead of something that was like deranged or deprived or whatever. So both my parents were very supportive of everything, really.
Wow, that's amazing. Because I was going to ask if, depending on what your answer was on that one, I was going to ask how much working with Howard Stern maybe pushed you to not give a shit about the genre being labeled as sort of a gutter genre, working with like a shock jock, maybe desensitize you from caring what other people thought about it. But it looks like you never had to worry about that in the first place. So that's pretty solid.
Yeah, and I got desensitized very, very early on as a kid. So yeah, it wasn't a problem.
And so what well, I need to know what are your favorite horror movies then, since you just told me what your father's were, but how about yourself?
I mean, early on, I think I was pretty much obsessed with the Elm Street series. I think
I wore the right sweater.
I was just about to say you absolutely did. So yeah, so that was my first thing, and I was one of those kids that was just like drawing out Freddy gloves, when I was in class, and doing Freddy makeups all the time, and getting my cousin who did metal work to actually make me like a real metal Freddy glove when I was a kid,
That's
and things
kick-ass.
like that. Yeah, so yeah, so I was obsessed with that, and of course, I mean, all the classic stuff, all the Friday 13th and Halloweens, and The Thing, and The Shining. I mean, all the big stuff. But every Sunday I was going to the video store where they had dollar day at the video store, so I'd rent 5 horror movies every single Sunday, and I'm just watching new stuff every single week, and it was fantastic. So I do miss those days of going into the video store and just seeing like a whole wall of stuff, just like picking out stuff, looking at it physically. It was so cool. So yeah, I mean, I had so many favorite horror films back in the day, and I still do. And yeah, it's a lot of people ask me like what my favorite horror films are, and it's really tough, because there's so many great ones, and sometimes if something
Yeah.
is just on, I'll sit down and watch it and be like, man, I really love this. I haven't seen it in a long time. But yeah, like more obscure stuff, like In the Mouth of Madness is something
Yes.
that I mention a lot.
Yeah, that's a
you know,
great one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Again,
it,
John Carpenter, speaking of, yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly. It's not one of the more popular films, but I think it's just,
yeah.
it's so clever, and I just one of my favorite kind of um, themes is just when reality just gets twisted around and you don't know what's real anymore, and you kind of either going into a different dimension, or reality just morphs and shifts into something different. So I love that kind of theme. And I just I love Sam Neill as a lead, and it was just such a great film. So stuff like that, Prince of Darkness, of course, and um, Serpent and the Rainbow, Wes Craven, and things like that. So yeah, but I mean, they're just, I could go on a huge list of
For sure.
of different things.
I assume it's a similar thing on the flip side of that, on the metal side of things. But do you have a sort of, the main ones, your go-tos, like Nightmare on Elm Street would be what in the metal genre for you? Like, would that be
Um,
Metallica or Megadeth or something? Or
yeah, I
do you
mean,
go?
that it shifts around a lot, because I really didn't get into metal until maybe the mid '90s. I wasn't like a metal kid early on. I wasn't that much into kind of music in general. I mean, earliest on, I think I first got into horror film soundtracks. So I'd go to the store and I'd pick up a cassette of the Lost Boys soundtrack, and that
Yeah,
was sort of like that's kind of how I started getting into it. And then I started buying the scores to
yeah,
the Elm Street movies and the soundtracks, and everything. So I was listening to a lot of scores and a lot of soundtracks, and I think I got exposed to a lot of different types of music through those soundtracks. Also, like the Elm Street 4 and 5 soundtrack have a lot of different types of music, a lot of rock stuff on there, and so I got into that. But yeah, I'd say probably in the early '90s, I started getting to grunge first, and then I got into the heavier stuff after that, and then so yeah, all the classic stuff, like Metallica, Megadeth, and Slayer, some of the newer stuff, Avatar, um, Lamb of God, things like that. So it's kind of, for with the music, there's no one band that I love the most. It kind of shifts, it just kind of depends. I'll get tired of hearing something for a while, and then I'll move on to something else. But yeah, I mean, like Slipknot, I love Slipknot, and yeah, I mean, I love the music of a lot of the bands and artists that are in the film. So
yeah,
that's one of the greatest things about making it, is that I get to kind of hang out with some of the people that I've really admired
yeah.
artistically.
Yeah, don't worry. I'm incredibly jealous of that. I wish that was my job. It
Yeah,
was like, oh yeah, perfect. I decided to, what is it? Write, direct, produce, edit, promote. What all jobs do you have on this shoot?
cater.
but yeah. So,
Literally.
you know, but being able to do all of those things, but also do it with the people that you wanted to hang out with and who you enjoy listening to or seeing, you know, on screen, that has got to be an amazing feeling.
It's very cool. Yeah, it's very cool. I mean, to sit down with Alice Cooper for an hour, and just pick his brain, and with no rush, no rush from like a manager or a publicist or anything like that that's trying to rush them out the door. And we even had one occasion where we're interviewing Corey Taylor before a Slipknot show in Jersey, and we're supposed to get maybe like 15 minutes with him, right? Because they had other interviews before the show, and we started going over. So his road manager came in and said, "Hey, Corey, we got to get you to the next interview." It's like, dude, just give me like another 5-10 minutes. I'm on a roll here. So
That's awesome.
so it was very cool that he was just like so laid back. He's like, and he's like, I could talk about this stuff all night. And so that's one thing that I really liked a lot about doing this, is that there was no real rush, to get anybody out of there. Everyone I interviewed was really into it, and they just love talking about the stuff. So yeah, it's very cool.
Amazing. So in terms of where you see like the marriage of metal and horror beginning, like obviously everyone needs to go see your film, so don't give away the entirety of your film. But where do you see that? Is it Black Sabbath taking their name from a previous horror film, or is it like Blue Cheer coming out and covering Summertime Blues, or is it, like, where do you see all that stuff hitting together all at once, metal and horror?
I mean, it actually started, yeah. I mean, without giving out too much of the history, because people are definitely going to learn some stuff that they probably didn't know too much about. But a lot of the theatrics started even before Black Sabbath. You have Arthur Brown, who was one of the first who started doing spooky makeup and stuff on stage. And he wasn't a metal guy, but it was the first time for a lot of people really seeing makeup and fire and smoke and scary stuff in these performances. Screaming Lord Sutch, a lot of the British guys were kind of starting this stuff, and of course Kiss and Sabbath, of course, who pretty much started metal as a genre. So yeah, so a lot of the stuff really started earlier on.
I wonder how many people are going to get upset with you that you even just said Kiss when talking about metal. And don't get me wrong, I actually love listening to Kiss. My girlfriend probably hates it by now, but it's interesting because I think a lot of people are like, that's not metal, that's like glam rock, blah blah blah. I don't care, Where do you sit on that? Just since you mentioned Kiss.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's people say the same thing about bands like Ghost. It's like, oh, that's not metal. But I think metal. I mean, there's so many different subgenres, of metal, and I think if you're just like a metal purist, where it's like metal has to sound like this, I think it's a little short-sighted. I think it branches out into so many different categories. I mean, who's to say what metal really is? I think if it's heavy, if it's it doesn't have to be dark all the time, but I think that helps. I mean, Kiss is definitely. I mean, Gene Simmons playing the demon character, can't deny that. I mean, that was such a major influence on so many artists.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt those guys definitely started something that a lot of the current guys grew up with and were influenced by. A lot of those guys dressed up as Kiss when they were kids for Halloween. So
for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, it's without a doubt, they were a major influence.
So yeah, I'm happy to hear you say it. I just wasn't sure where you'd sit on that, because a lot of people, I think, give Kiss a rough time when it comes to metal. But I mean, that being said, people also seem to give Black Sabbath a hard time now, because they're like, that's not metal, that's just like classic rock. I'm like, that is classic metal, man. What are you talking about?
Yeah. I don't know if I want to hang out with people who think like that, but
well, yeah, and it's funny because a lot of what you were just saying reflects. So I'm super happy that we're of one mind on this. But when I was doing my broadcast on Halloween, it was very much just like discussing that idea that anyone who just thinks like metal has to be people screaming and yelling and you don't understand the lyrics and it's just chugging all the way through, kind of miss the point.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe you don't like hair metal versus heavy metal versus death metal or black or whatever, new metal and all that stuff. But yeah, there's so much, as you say, and like you should dig into it and not be so bloody short-sighted.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've been touring the festival circuit for a bit now and have won. Do you have a number of how many awards you've won so far? Because I was going through some of them and I was like, Jesus, you're cleaning up, it seems.
Yeah, I think it's probably up to about 5 at this point. I was just in Orlando. We did the Spooky Empire convention recently, and I got an award for Fair Maker of the Year, which was pretty cool. Yeah, I think they came up with a new category. But yeah, so I got best editing for one. I got best feature documentary for another one. So it's been going great. I think I've been accepted into over 20 festivals so far around the country, and there was one in Norway that it just showed at. It was in South Africa this past weekend. It's going to be in London next month. So yeah, it's getting around a bit, which is pretty cool.
Are you flying to all these? Like, are you at all these festivals? Or
no.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Say, that's crazy, man.
It's tough, and it's really tough because even if they're within distance that I could reach, it's so much traveling. You know, I mean, there was the weekend that I did Spooky Empire. There was also Scarefest in Kentucky. You know, like on the Saturday morning, it would have been Scarefest, and then it would have been Spooky Empire in the evening, and then the next morning, you know, it would have been Screamfest in New Orleans. And at first, I was like trying to figure out how I can like kind of go from one to the next, and then go home. But it was impossible. You know, logistically, it was just too much to do. So yeah, and to fly overseas at this point is tough. You know, and you know, I got a wife and a 3-year-old at home, so it's tough to kind of get away so frequently, and it's expensive too. You know, I got to pay for flights, hotels, transportation, food, and it's just it's too much. So most filmmakers, I think, kind of stay home for most of them, and get out to the ones that are doable.
And so when did the circuit begin for you then with the film?
I think in July I started submitting, because I think it was in June, probably June, where I finally locked picture and it was good to go. That it was ready for submission to the festival. So I jumped on that as soon as I could.
Nice.
And yeah, probably submitted to, I don't even know how many. You know, I kind of lose track. You know, there's a great site called Film Freeway where you submit all your films to, and it's just thousands of film festivals all around the world, and you kind of get addicted to it. You know, it's like, oh yeah, let me submit to this one and this one and this one. I try to be a little, careful with that, because not every festival is right for my film.
No.
So I try to submit to the ones that really that it works with. So yeah, but it's been going great so far. We just did the AMC Theater in Times Square last night, so that was pretty cool. You know, it was a nice theater, and it was local, so I was able to just drive downtown and go to that one, which was nice. And all my friends, friends and family were there too. So yeah, it's been fun. I've been enjoying it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so when does the circuit end, as far as you know, for all the festivals you've managed to get the film out to?
I try to cap it off at spring of 2022. There are some that I was trying to cap it off a little earlier, but there were some that I still wanted to enter into. So, so I have those coming up, and for what along the way, I'm trying to get some distribution offers as well. And if something good comes through, then if I have to bail out of some of the festivals, then I will. But I think I could probably stick through it for a while. But it's fun, it's fun to just kind of submit to these things and get my laurels, to put on the website and everything. So I'll stick through it for a while, and then if I get a good deal for distribution, then I'll move to that next level, and then hopefully in early 2022 we'll have official releases, Blu-rays, DVDs, streaming, things like that.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
So maybe I've already missed it, but is there going to be a showing in Toronto by any chance between now and spring 2022?
I think I submitted to one in Toronto. Not sure. I'll have to check, but I think there were a few Canadian festivals that I entered into, so I think I'm still waiting on some of those. But yeah, I'll definitely let you know if anything comes through.
If I can see it before I the official release, and I go and buy the thing anyway, which I'm obviously going to do, I'm going to go see it. But yeah, that's fantastic. Now, a little turn, but so were you filming all of this like when Joey Jordison and Sid Haig both passed away? Like, were you already finished filming, or were you still in production during those?
Well, I filmed Sid back in, I think it might have been 2015. And that's when like Sid was still Sid at that time. He was still pretty high energy, still had a good sense of humor. I mean, we had we had lunch, breakfast together a couple of times, and just kind of hung out and stuff. So he was still in really good shape at that point. And then seeing him year after year when his health started to decline, it started to get really kind of sad, to see him. Yeah. You haven't seen him in a couple of months, and he's lost a bunch of weight, and he's just not looking well, and everyone just kind of saw it coming, that things were going downhill very quickly. So I was fortunate enough to get the interview when he was still, pretty good shape and still himself at that point. I think I did try to get Joey. I had met him once in New York, and we have mutual friends, but it was just he was going through a lot of tough times over the past bunch of years, so it didn't really work out to get an interview. So unfortunately, it would have been great to include him, but he was definitely having some hard times throughout the years. So unfortunately, that didn't work out. But yeah, I mean, three people in the film have passed away since. It's also Gunnar Hansen, the original Leatherface. He passed away, and John Schnepp from Metalocalypse, and a lot of other projects. He also passed a couple of years back. So yeah, I've been fortunate to be able to get some interviews with some of these great guys, and yeah, it's sucks that they're gone. It's really sad.
But so how did that hit? So again, I'm not even quite sure how large your crew is on this, because it sounds like a lot of the time you're just kind of, I just went off on my own to get this interview, and there it is. But like, how did that hit you or the crew, like working through this, having interviewed several and then having that happen, or seeing things happen like with Sid, like seeing that decline? Like, did that alter the course of the film overall at all, like with what you used for the interviews? Or
no, I mean, pretty much by the time they passed, I heard already compiled the footage that I wanted from their interview. So yeah, it didn't really affect anything. I try to use the best clips from each person's interview that I could, regardless of anything going on. So yeah. Their deaths didn't affect anything as far as the edit goes.
Cool. And like so, and just backtracking to some Master of Horror stuff. So you already mentioned Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th and all that, but how did like Wes Craven or Tobe Hooper or like George A. Romero, like all of these greats, like were they part of the drive specifically of this film? Like that, did you pull inspiration from specifically their work, knowing they had passed? Like, no, but you said 2015 you were filming interviews for this, right? So
I started in 2014.
Wes Craven would have still been alive then at that point. I guess all three of them I just named would have still been kicking at that point.
I mean, there were definitely people that I wanted to get, and for whatever reason, it just didn't work out. So it's and there are still some people that are still around that I would like to have included, but for whatever reason, it's just timing wise, management wise, or whatever it is, just didn't come together. So yeah, like I did the best I could to get everyone that I really wanted.
Yeah.
And a couple of good surprises along the way, people that I didn't really expect to get initially, and they came through throughout the process. So yeah, I've been very lucky. I know sometimes people send messages on social media, whatever, saying, hey, why don't you get so and so? And I don't want to like badmouth anyone and say, hey, well, so and so said said to go to hell or whatever, which nobody did. Nobody said anything like that. But yeah, I've had a couple of declines for interviews. So I don't want to say who declined what or whatever. But yeah, there are definitely some people that would have liked to have gotten. It just didn't work out.
Yeah, and but working with all of them, as you say, there are all the ones you did get were all keen and very interested in the topic, obviously.
Yeah. It's funny because some of them, like Dave Mustaine, who had us over at his house to do the interview,
Awesome.
and couldn't have been the nicer guy. He, as soon as we got in there, he was like, "Hey, can I get you guys some coffee, some water, or whatever?" And he was like so friendly and really cool. And he sat down and he's like, I'm not really sure why I agreed to do this interview. Not in a bad way, but he's like, I'm just not really like a huge horror guy per se. But once we started rolling and I started asking the questions, I mean, he had excellent answers to everything horror related, and he of course did end up having a lot of favorite horror films and things like that. So a lot of the people that I interviewed were actually surprised at how much they were able to contribute. Some of them just didn't really think they had much to add to the subject matter, that I still got tons and tons of footage from a lot of them. So
I mean,
it's just asking just the right questions and just getting all these thoughts flowing in their brains. And sometimes you just come up with stuff you never really thought about for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, even if Dave Mustaine didn't have any horror stuff to say, it's not like he didn't have anything to say about metal. So
yeah, and he had a lot to say about the connection between metal and horror. So yeah, we got a lot of great stuff from him. Much to his own surprise, I think.
That's perfect. And so how's the reaction been then through obviously with awards? I mean, you must assume it's going fairly well, but for the releases that or the festivals you did get to attend, how's the crowd seem to take the film?
Good. The in-person festivals have been tough. COVID is still a problem. People are still nervous about going out and getting together in smaller spaces and things like that. The festival audience sometimes is a little thin. People just aren't into festivals that much. They want to wait till the official release on the big Hollywood premiere or whatever it is, or if it's on disc, they just want to be at home sitting on the couch watching stuff. There are a lot of people who just don't really want to go out to stuff, especially to festivals, because they might see stuff that they're not really into. But the people that have actually stuck around, I mean, I've got a lot of great feedback from them. Yeah, they've been happy with it. I do Q&As, get a bunch of questions, and yeah, so people who are, I think the film will appeal to a pretty broad audience. I mean, I think if you're into metal and horror, then I think it's perfect for you. But I have had people also who were not really fans of either, but they felt that the story was interesting enough that they were able to sit through it and appreciate it for what it was, as sort of like a story and getting a lot of historical information about these genres as well. So if they're into history, then it kind of, there's something in it for them too.
Yeah.
And plus also there's it's not just a documentary, but there's a short narrative film, about a 13-minute narrative film that's broken up into sections, and that's what Michael Berryman hosts, and it stars Alex Rafala, who's a up and coming actor who was great in it. So I didn't want to just do a regular talking head B-roll documentary. I wanted to have kind of a short film where each section of the documentary is introduced by a portion of the film. So it's a little bit different than what most people are used to, which so far the reaction to that has been really good.
Right on. So what's your most frequently asked question? I feel like I might have opened with it, but what's your most frequently asked question?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you touched on it. Yeah. What's your favorite horror film? What's your favorite metal band? So
Fair enough. Fair enough.
yeah.
All right. What's your second most frequent? No, I'm kidding. So, I mean, I'm not going to hold you for too much longer, but is there anything overall that what's your aim to convey to the audience? Like, obviously, without giving away the side story that you have that introduces each segment, and just talking about the marriage of metal and horror, is there a specific point you want to make about these two giant genres, or is it just about, hey, like, this is metal, this is horror, and this is a perfect marriage? Like,
Yeah, it's getting into we kind of do a psychological dive into why this works as well, you know. So it's not just people talking about their favorite horror films and their favorite metal bands or whatever it is. It's really getting into like why these two genres work together as well as they do, sort of at a psychological level. You know, that's kind of how we conclude the film. So yeah, so it's a lot of diving into the history of both heavy metal and horror, like where it all came from, why these genres emerged the way they did, what was the sort of the desire by fans to get into these things, and yeah, then just how it influenced people, how it influenced all these metal artists, and I mean it's pretty easy to see that almost all of them, you know, all metal guys are into horror, you know, to some degree. I haven't met too many metal guys who are like, nah, you know, I like romantic comedies. I'm not really into, you know, into horror so much. It's not my thing. It's like I'd say the overwhelming majority of metal artists are horror fans. So yeah, so I want to kind of just dive into that. Like, why is that? Why is it that, you know, people are into these dark art forms the way they are?
right on. So what would you want to say to a prospective fan of the film who hasn't got out to a festival and has to wait for your distribution deal to see it? And what would you say to fans who have already gone out to say? Is there anything you might want to share with them right now, or about?
Yeah, I mean, for anyone who's already seen it, you know, thank you for coming out and taking your time out of your day or your evening to watch the film. Is definitely very much appreciated. The more seats we have in the theater to watch something that I spent almost 7 years creating is very much appreciated. And for the upcoming festivals, if there are people who are interested in checking those out, I'm doing pretty frequent updates on my social media sites, which I'll give the info for. So yeah, it'll be great for people to come out and see the film before the larger audience does. And you know, I think some people might appreciate that, kind of being one of the first to see something before everybody else, you know, kind of being in that early stage of when the film is getting out there. So yeah, if anyone kind of has an appreciation for that, you know, it'd be great to see out there.
Awesome. Mike Schiff, I have to thank you so much, man. This is awesome. I can't wait to see the movie. I'm super jealous of everything that you've done, because I would love to sit down with all of the people you've named and just shoot the shit with them. But
well, yeah, maybe we'll all get together one of these days for a big premiere or something, and you know, and see how that goes. But yeah, in the meantime, if anyone wants to keep up with the project, metalhorror.com is the website, and the social medias are all at the Metal Horror. So if anyone wants to keep up with what's happening with the project, where it's going to be seen next, when it's going to be available to the general public, then that's the best way to follow up on that.
And I need to know, before you go, when you were sitting there talking with Alice Cooper, was it on a golf course?
It was not.
Okay.
I think he had already golfed. He golfs very early in the morning. So
Okay.
yeah, I think we got him later in the afternoon.
Excellent.
closer to lunchtime. So he had already been out golfing. He had already relaxed a bit, but he came out to chill out with us afterwards. So so yeah, it wasn't at the golf course, but it was at Cooperstown at his restaurant, which was very cool because he had a whole downstairs area set up for interviews and everything. So yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Right on. Awesome, man. Thanks so much again, and yeah, we'll be in touch, I hope, and I'll send you the links once the interview is up, and when we're broadcasting it on the station as well. And yeah,
awesome. Yeah, no,
It's,
thanks so much for having me, and yeah, let's definitely keep in touch, and
Yeah.
I'll keep you posted on any big events coming up, and yeah, it'll be cool to just kind of keep the horror and metal family together
Oh,
and
I'll
doing stuff.
I'll keep promoting the shit out of it, so that's a for sure thing. And I have to say, when I messaged, like once I was digging through the site and looking at all the info, I was like, man, this is going to be so good. And I was like, well, I have to email just to see if someone will get back to me. And then the bottom of the email afterwards from you was like, Mike. And I was like, wait a minute. There's no fucking way the director just sent me the email. This is, I figured some PA would be like, oh yeah, well, we'll get back to you if you want to chat for 2 seconds about this or that or whatever. So
No, the project is pretty much just me. So
I saw that when I was looking at the list of jobs you have on the thing. That's for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, and catering is not even an exaggeration. Like I picked up the donuts in the morning for for some of the shoots. So
Wow.
yeah, it's when you're working with limited crew and budget, it's like you make it work one way or the other. So yeah, so I did what I had to do.
So on the shoot specifically, then, like when on a shooting day, how many people are there running the show? Like,
No more than two for the most part. It would
shit.
be it would be me doing the cam work, the audio, the lighting, set design, pretty much everything, and then one other person who sat in the chair to just ask the questions, and can keep an eye line with the interviewee, and then I would kind of direct along the way and shout out a couple of extra questions here and there. So yeah, it was definitely guerrilla style to say the least. I'm like monitoring audio, I'm watching the shots, I'm checking out the lighting, I'm looking at like everything throughout. Like my brain is going in all different directions while still trying to make sure that I'm getting what I need content wise from each person. So it's a challenge, but at the same time kind of rewarding, because I can finally look at the finished product and say, I really worked hard on this thing and put in a lot of work myself. So, and it's not to say that I didn't have help, and I definitely had a lot of friends to come out to work as production assistants on some shoots and some other stuff. So I definitely give credit where credit is due. And my wife was there for a lot of the shoots as well, and she was great. We traveled. That made traveling a lot of fun too, and everything. So. Yeah, so it's a very small production, but I think everything came out pretty well considering.
Nice. So, and I'm sorry, I'm just gonna, as soon as we start talking about the behind the scenes shit, I'm just gonna keep going about it. But so like, how long would a setup take for any given interview, since you're the one doing the lighting and the sound and the camera?
If I had the luxury of time, I'd set up for about an hour. Just to make sure that all the little kinks are worked out. So I would always try to, if I was going out to a location, I would always try to request an hour to set up if possible. It wasn't always possible. Sometimes they say, you got like 20 minutes to set up, but then, you got like a 10-minute interview, you got a half hour, time slot that you got to work, you got to make everything happen. And so I did. And some of the interviews we did on tour buses, which wasn't ideal. It certainly wasn't my favorite with that motor running and the tight spaces.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, we shot the one with Avatar was probably the most interesting, because we actually had 3 people on crew, me and 2 other guys, and then 2 guys from Avatar. So we're all crunched into like the back of the tour bus with lights, with 2 cameras, with audio and all this stuff. So I think I have a behind the scenes photo somewhere where we're just like tight in this little space. But that's kind of, it makes for good stories as well. So yeah, so it's not too bad. And then other times we had just like tons of space to work with, and sometimes I'd rent hotel rooms when I'm at the horror convention. So I'd have a room set up and I just keep it lit and everything for the whole weekend. I wouldn't tear anything down until I'm ready to pack it up and go home. And then I would just go down to some of the celebrities downstairs and say, hey, I got a room set up upstairs for interviews. If you have a couple of minutes to spare, just come right up. And then I try to change the background a little bit for each person and change up the lighting so it doesn't look like the same setup for each person. So, but yeah, it's there's a lot of different scenarios. It wasn't the type of thing where I had one studio set up somewhere and then I just flew everybody in to do the interview. It's like I'm traveling to wherever they are because they're all donating their time to do this thing. And so, understandably, I got to kind of work around their comfort level and their convenience. So yeah, that's how that all came together.
That's amazing. I'm really stoked to see it, man. I'm really excited. So I'll keep promoting the hell out of it on the station, on my meager little YouTube channel, and do what I can on this side of things. But sounds like it's doing amazing, and I'll just keep saying I can't wait to see it. So
cool. Thanks. No, I appreciate it. I appreciate again having me on. So it was it was a fun chat, and we'll definitely keep in touch. For sure.
I'm gonna want to do a couple more of these just to get some more behind the scenes how Dave Mustaine was and Alice Cooper and the like sitting at their homes being super nice and unmetal.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I'd be happy to elaborate more on some of these things.
Beauty. Right on. Thanks so much, Mike.
Cool. Thank you. All right. Have a good evening.
Yeah, you too. Talk soon.
Take care.
Bye.